Babysitters of Reddit. What were the weirdest rules parents asked you to follow? Story 1, not a rule, but a single mom once told me to use the bat by the door in the event the kid's father comes by and tries to take them. That was pretty weird and uncomfortable. Story 2 wasn't a rule, but on my first day, they sent over an adult male friend of theirs who asked to come in. I said no, and was then told I was being tested and I had passed. Story 3, I had to put the kids to sleep with the CD player going. That wasn't the weird part. It was a recording of their parents basically going, "Molly, you are wonderful, you are a star, you're going to shine bright." That isn't super weird, but it was like several hours long, and apparently they listened to it every night. Story 4 asked me to drive their 3-year-old twins around in my personal vehicle for 5 hours because that's the only way they can nap. No, I simply put the kids in their beds, closed the door, and they were asleep in 15 minutes. Story 5, OMG, thanks for asking, because you reminded me of a weird thing. The 3-year-old daughter had to watch this VHS tape of a live Fleetwood Mac concert before bed. I was like, okay, cute, that's adorable. 3-year-olds love the weirdest things. She's so quirky, and this will be fun, but she didn't love it. She always wanted to watch Land Before Time instead. But it was always on the note left for me, like pager number, pediatrician, chicken soup for dinner is in fridge, and watch Fleetwood Mac at 6:30 before bed. Obviously, the family eventually found out I wasn't making her watch it, as I had no reason to believe it was a secret. They were clearly upset by this, and I was never called back to babysit. So that was weird. Story 6, get ready for a creepy story. I was 13 and was babysitting my neighbor's kids. It was my first time, so the parents walked me through all the rules about the bathroom and TV and food and bedtime, etc. Just as the parents were taking off for the night, the mom came back in and whispered to me, "Don't go into the basement." As a teenager in the 80s, my mind went to all of the scariest movies that had basements. I avoided the door to the basement all night until I put the kids to bed. Then I walked slowly to the door and put my ear against it. I heard what sounded like whimpering, and then it sounded like sad laughing. I ran to the couch and started watching TV to get my mind off of it. But then I heard something fall in the basement and knew someone was down there. I really don't know how I got the courage, stupidity to do it, but I went over and opened the door. The whining instantly got louder. I went down just 3 or 4 stairs so I could peek down, and I saw a goat. Not a ghost, a goat. As soon as the goat saw me, he started bleating loudly. It scared the out of me. I went upstairs and the goat was still bleating loudly, so much that it woke up the kids. The oldest girl came out and said, "Did you open the door to the basement?" I said, "Yeah, why?" She said, "When you do that, Carlos thinks you're going to feed him," and he starts yelling. Thank God I knew it was a goat first, because if she had said that before I went down, I would have thought Carlos was some kidnapped person in the basement who would yell for food. It became very funny to me. The mom came home, and I told her what happened, and she almost died of laughing. They were repairing the goat pen and had to keep him in the basement for a few days. I still remember every moment of that night vividly. Edit 1, thanks for the gold edit 2, since a lot of people are asking. I think she told me not to go into the basement that way, either to mess with me, or she was so used to telling her daughters not to go down there that she didn't even think of how creepy it would sound to someone else. I bet that goat was probably driving her crazy over the last week. Edit 3, triple gold. Thank you. Story 7, on the opposite end of the spectrum. The family gave me instructions to let their kids drink chocolate milk, which they were otherwise not allowed to have. I think they wanted their kids to associate babysitter time with fun time, so the parents could go out more often. Seemed to work out well for them. The kids both grew up to be successful people. Story 8, the mom had me put her kids in their car seats and sit in the driveway, with all the car doors open while she just hung out inside the house. 5 hours of me, standing in the driveway, watching them sit inside their car. Never returned. Edit, I never returned to babysit for her again. Not that the mother mysteriously disappeared. As for people asking why I didn't take them somewhere, she specifically asked me to just sit in the driveway with them. I also didn't have my driver's license yet, so I couldn't have taken them anywhere even if I wanted to. The kids were twins who were 4 years old, I think. They were weirdly well-behaved and didn't complain about what we were doing. To this day, I have no idea what she was doing inside or why she didn't just let them play in the yard. I am just as confused as you. Story 9, I used to babysit for this family when I was in high school in the 80s, and they had no books or reading material of any kind, except that there would usually be like 2 sections of the Wall Street Journal and a running magazine lying around. No books. Anyway, once I went over there and the mom told me like 9 times, begged me not to eat the box of Nilla wafers that was in the cupboard because she needed them for a recipe the next day. I was like, okay, got it. They're totally safe because I don't even like vanilla wafers. She kept mentioning it, and it was the first thing she asked me about when they got home. Story 10, I used to regularly babysit one of my younger cousins at nap time. I had to put her in a zip-up pajama with feet. I then had to duct tape the zipper down and duct tape the wrists in a way that wasn't restricting, but she couldn't pull her hands into her onesie. If I didn't do this, she would pull her hands in and dig in her diaper. Always. My aunt got tired of cleaning covered walls regularly. Story 11 told me that under no circumstances could the kid use the restroom. Because he was grounded, obviously, I ignored this. Later, it was discovered his father physically and abused him. He was a prominent member of a large religious community in the town, so it shocked us. Indeed, a lot of the replies are having some misconceptions about the religion of the mentioned person. The man was an imam at a local and very popular mosque in our community. Story 12, to give him warm milk in a baby bottle right after every dinner. He was a fully functional 10-year-old boy. Edit to answer some of the questions, yes. He was fine with it. His parents were otherwise normal as far as I saw. The kid himself was great. His teeth seemed fine from what I can remember. Not that I really would have paid attention to that back then. But I just found him on Facebook, and it looks like he did have braces around 14 to 15 years old. Story 13, hippie family. The 2-year-old had no bedtime and no rules. She can eat what she wants, no bedtime. And if she falls asleep, leave her wherever she crashed. The parents came home at 2:30 to a toddler eating chocolate cake on the couch with her preferred American Pickers on TV. That's fine, apparently. 6 months later, the mom is very pregnant and asked that when the baby is born, if I could wrangle the toddler while the mom gives birth in a bathtub at home. The 2-year-old was to be in the room, watching, while I explained what's happening. I left that evening when the parents came home, fried chicken in the toddler's hand, keeping up with the Kardashians on TV, and denied their next request to come sit. As a 20-year-old, I wasn't prepared to see the mess of someone else's home birth. Story 14, I babysat my 4 cousins once. Aged maybe 8 to 12, one night they all asked for me to read a story, so I happily obliged. When I told my aunt, she replied, they're much too old for that. Why did you do it? Well, if the kids want a story, I'll read them a story. Why the not? I've read stories to my 35 husband before in the car, though. Not before bedtime. Edit contrary to what some of you have said, my aunt isn't evil and isn't someone who would put her kids in front of some trashy reality show. They're an upper middle class, well-educated family. In fact, my uncle collects amazing, mostly European graphic novels, and the kids have always had access to culture books, museums, concerts. I think my aunt just meant something like you didn't have to do that. How odd from them. She doesn't have any filter and is usually quite blunt. Maybe the kids never asked her to read to them. Then again, yeah, in the end, just sounded wrong, but like chill. Edit to you guys have shared such lovely stories about reading to each other, grandparents to grandkids, lovers to lovers, dads and mums to kids, and vice versa. Keep on reading, keep on telling stories, keep on using that brain voice of yours. Big hugs to all of you. Story 15, if the kids misbehaved, I was encouraged to spank them with a paddle they had, then make them write their names on it. Another family was perfectly normal until bedtime. Then I had to give the 5-year-old girl a bottle, put her in a diaper, then cuddle with her until she fell asleep. Like I said, everything else about her and the family was normal, but at bedtime, I basically had to treat her like an infant. Story 16, the kid couldn't have dessert if she didn't finish her dinner. Problem was she was about 4 or 5 and dinner was 2 cheeseburgers and sides. She ate half of one and was okay with not getting dessert. Story 17, no hot sauce after 9 p.m. Edit to give some context, the kid loved hot sauce, but his folks were super overprotective. Maybe they had heard of PPL eating too much hot sauce and throwing it up as it would not settle. Honestly, the kid was made of solid steel. We went to Taco Bell pretty much every time I babysat. Story 18-1 had me feed her 1-year-old only from a freshly opened baby food container. If she only ate 2 or 3 spoonfuls, I was to throw it away, and when she wanted more in 15 minutes, I was to open a new one. I thought it was so she would finish her meal and be full for a while, but she said it was okay to feed her every time she wanted it. I would probably throw away 5 or 6 jars in a 2-hour sitting. They cost more than I usually made for sitting. Story 19, not a rule, as I only went there once, but a very odd request. I used to work housekeeping at a hospital. A doctor that was frequently on the floor that I worked on asked me if I could watch his kids on Saturdays. He had 3 toddlers, ages 2, 3, and 4. His wife didn't work, but wanted time to go shopping and get her hair and nails done. I totally understand. As my son was 4, I was also allowed to bring him. I get there early as the doctor is getting ready to leave. He says he's cooking breakfast, and while he gets the kids fed and dressed, could I help change his wife's tampon? She had drunk a lot the night before and was completely passed out and was leaking and messing up their sheets. She has a doctor. I told him I should work for someone more than a few minutes before I go rummaging in their private parts, and that I'd tend to the kids if he tended to his wife. What I really wanted to do was leave, but the kids would be home alone with their hungover mother. So I chose to finish cooking and stay. He went upstairs and sent the kids to the kitchen where I was putting food on plates. After a little while, he popped his head in and said it was a short day. He was done upstairs, and he was leaving. I never met the wife. He came home at noon, gave me 100, and I never spoke to him again. Story 20, only 2 hours of reading time. To be fair, the mom was a librarian, and her 2 kids were adorably nerdy. They had an entire room filled with books, and even then would make trips to the library from time to time. The rest of the time was supposed to be outside or doing some activity. It was a super sweet deal too, because she paid for not only her kids to have a pool pass, but me as well, so we basically went every day all summer, and we would play in the pool. Story 21, when I was about 14, some friends of my parents asked me to babysit their 9 or 10 son who wanted a boy babysitter. When I got to their house, the mom told me that her son loved poached eggs and asked me to make him a poached egg on toast for dinner. She quickly explained to me how to make it, as if for something really simple and easy. Later that night, after wasting half their eggs in a hopeless effort to make a poached egg, I asked the kid if he liked scrambled eggs. He said he loved scrambled eggs and ate them without complaint. When the parents came home, I apologized for using up their eggs. They laughed and seemed to appreciate the effort, although the mom explained it again and insisted that it was really simple. I'm almost 40 now, and I still at making poached eggs, and it cracks me up that the mom thought a 14-year-old should be able to whip one up based on a few instructions. On the other hand, as a parent, I appreciate the out of that kid. Edit wow, I love that this has brought out so many egg poaching tips. Now I need suggestions for hollandaise. Story 22, I was babysitting a 3-4-ish-year girl and an 18-mo boy. The boy had to be carried in a buggy, which is all very well, but it was supposed to add some kind of mini stairs 2 steps on the back of it, so the girl could stand on it, because her legs get tired, said parents, while making quotation marks with their fingers. The thing hit my legs every time I took a step. That kid was also taught to not wait and look for restrooms when she needed to go, and proceeded one time to take in a public garden and wipe herself with a leaf with an ease that certified me that wasn't her first time. Story 23, not babysitter, but my friend was 24 and his parents asked him to watch their house while they were gone. They left a list of rules and instructions. It was on a laminated paper and looked like something for a 10-year-old. He was not allowed to answer the door, and if someone kept knocking, he was to call the cops. Story 24, babysat for a family that had 3 boys, 1 a newborn. I was never to feed the baby by holding it next to me, but I was to put on my legs and make eye contact with him at all times. No cuddling. Also, I was never to let the older boys lose any game we were playing. I quit after about a month. Years later, I found out that youngest one, the baby that wasn't to be cuddled, jumped off the Golden Gate Bridge. Story 25. They asked me to spoon-feed their 3-year-old. He was perfectly capable of eating by himself, yet they fed him like that until he was 5. I also interviewed for a family that had twins, and they were still sleeping in cribs at 3 years old. The mother wanted me to hand wash their socks and underwear. No, thank you. Story 26. The mother asked me to stop by the house to meet her 2-year-old son a week before I was supposed to babysit him for the first time. I pulled up to the house and saw that the young boy was standing at the glass front door with a t-shirt on and nothing else. I go in, and I must have given the child a strange look, because the mom started to explain that her son doesn't like to wear pants, so they let him run around pantsless with no diaper on, though he isn't potty trained. I told her that this made me uncomfortable and asked if I could put pants on him when I was watching him, and she got upset with me and said they don't like to make their 2-year-old son do anything he doesn't like to do, so they let him run around without pants on, which unfortunately means he goes to the bathroom on the floor since he won't wear a diaper, and he isn't potty trained. Story 27, one woman I found through care, was just generally pretty weird. Some of the weirder things were, only let the kids have 3 spoonfuls of peanut butter each. The boy might want to throw softballs at me, just try to catch them to avoid getting hit. Also, if he doesn't want to brush his teeth, just hold him down and do it for him, even if he's screaming. Also, both times I babysat, she didn't tell me when she'd be home and didn't howl up until the middle of the night. Totally wasted. The first time she forgot to pay me, and I was too nervous to say anything, so she had me pick cash up from her mailbox later in the week. She shorted me 5. The kids screamed, hit, fought, and made messes the whole time, and wanted me to chase them around the yard with sticks. I did not. I also stopped going there. Story 28, okay. So, I thought it was weird, but after reading through these posts, yikes anyway, when I was a kid, there was a mom who would only allow her kids to do art on Tuesdays. I never learned why it was only one day or why it was Tuesday, but she totally flipped out one day when we did it on the wrong day. Story 29, mother, our children 6, 4, 1 are vegetarian. Please respect that. Father, once the mother has gone upstairs, sorry, but they are my kids too. If they want meat, it's because they probably need it. There's a fridge in my workshop. Story 30, my mom told me a story of when she used to babysit during her teenage years. She did it for this religious family whose church did not believe in television or their members watching it. She would bring a portable TV with her to watch once the kids were asleep. The parents came home, and they were captivated by it. They would invite her over just so they could watch television. Story 31 Mom was A-OK with girls aged 7 and 9 watching Grease every day, leading the girls to ask over lunch one day what a hooker was. Mom was not okay with them watching Disney's Hercules, as it's centered around gods other than the one true. Story 32 refused to let their kids eat raw veggies for absolutely no reason. They never told me this, so I gave the kids ages 5 to 7 raw, washed and cut broccoli with some ranch for a snack. They were happily eating as the mom was getting ready for a party. She walked by, saw the kids eating the broccoli, took it from them, microwaved it, and said they like it much better this way. The kids did not like it better, and even they thought it was weird. I was then instructed to never give them raw veggies. I could understand if they were toddlers still learning to chew, but these kids were plenty old enough to chew broccoli florets without choking. Story 33 If Brady stand by the door, it just means he needs to go out, open the door, and let him back inside in a few minutes. Brady was a 4-year-old boy. Story 34 Not to clean, like even the dishes after feeding him 6 years, or his toys. He didn't have to either. Just struck me as odd. Edit this got bigger, but I did address some of the common replies, so. Story 35 When I was a kid, I got paid $75 a week to watch 2 boys over a summer. It was amazing money, but the dad was a big bow hunter, and he made loads of deer chili, and he insisted that his 10-year-old and 2-year-old eat tons of it. They loved it, but the 2-year-old would take these massive, awful, horrible, nasty chili shits constantly. The dad explained all this to me, and my instructions were to just put him in the shower and hose him down. I was offered plenty of chili, but never ate any. Story 36 One parent said, I had to read a Bible passage during dinner and for a bedtime story. I also had to use Christian discipline methods. To this day, I have no idea what she meant, but if the kids acted out, I would just say, would the Lord like you doing that? How to make the kids pray every 15 minutes. I thought it was a bit much, but gotta respect it. Another one said, I had to do this really complicated skincare routine. Maybe the kid's skin is sensitive. No, the kid was fine. The mother was just obsessed with that whole glass skin fad. Edit, I spelled pray wrong twice. Please forgive me. Story 37, not allowed to serve her kid food that was heated in the microwave. Also, she never told me this until after I babysat her and berated me for it. How was I supposed to know? Guess I ruined that child. That same lady would give me a list of chores to complete too. How am I supposed to watch your kid and vacuum your house? Edit a word. Story 38, I never really had any rules to follow, but I did have one terrible mother. The mom asked me to babysit her 3 kids overnight. As I was in high school, I couldn't do it. So she said she could be back by 9 p.m. I figured it was fine, and let my mom know, even though they only lived a few houses away. The kids were great. We played around, watched a movie. I fed them and put them to bed. 9 p.m. rolls around, and the mom was nowhere to be found. She hadn't left a number to reach her, and I figured she was just running behind. I cleaned up and watched some TV while waiting for her. 10 p.m. hits. Not home. 11 p.m. Nope. Finally at around 12 p.m. I call my mom. I explain what's up, that I'm tired and have school in the morning ECT. She agrees to come and stay away the house with the kids till their mom shows up. Turns out she didn't come home till around 10 a.m. the next morning. Long after my mom had called CPS, she gave my mom 20 for 16 hours of babysitting. None of the neighborhood kids were allowed to babysit for her after that. Story 39, when I was 14, the neighbors asked me to come for an interview as a babysitter. They were on a couch, and I was sitting in a couch opposite. Every time I looked at the dad, he would shift his eyes down to his lap. Eventually, I also looked down on his lap. He was wearing very short shorts with no underwear, and his penis hanging out against his leg. Needless to say, I declined the offer. Edit okay. I found another post about him. I was somewhere between 12 and 14 when this all went down. I may have been younger. This was almost 20 years ago. I don't know how to link to old comments on mobile, but here it is from a couple years ago. Oh, pandemonium. 2Y. When I was about 12 years old, the next door neighbor's husband started beating the out of her in the middle of the night, kicked her out of the house, then was holding the baby hostage. I woke up to screaming and crying coming from the bathroom as my mom and the neighbor lady hid. Let me in, Mom. I screamed, terrified. He's not going to hurt you. You're safe. Some along those lines. Mom won't let me in the bathroom. Crazy boyfriend now has broken a window and says he's going to come in and kill us all. We lived in a neighborhood, and this was in the 80s. The police said this was domestic dispute and wasn't a priority unless we knew the guy had a gun. For a good 20 minutes, we listened to the guy hollering that he was going to kill himself, kill the baby, kill us. Mom still wouldn't let me and my brother, who was now awake, into the bathroom, the only door with a lock. I would also like to point out this had also at one point flashed his at me and told me I looked like I was built for. Remember, I was 12 years old. Anyhow, I finally snuck into the dining room, which is where the broken window was, and also where the phone was. We didn't have a cordless, guys. This was the 80s. I called the police and lied. I told him I heard a gun go off, and now the baby wasn't crying. 3 more minutes, and there was like a SWAT team on our street. That was one of the most terrifying moments in my life. Babysat for a woman who knew my mom. She had 2 kids. Both acted like feral animals, kicked, and bit me very hard when I told them no. She had her TV behind a plexiglass thing, because they keep breaking TVs. She had locks on the outside of the bedroom door, and crib set up that essentially locked the younger kid 3 or 4 years old in her crib. It had a top that you pulled down and padlocked to the sides. It was absolutely horrific. The kids screamed murder when I tried to get them to listen. Their grandma, who lived next door, came over. Did she come over to help me out? No. She gave these kids cookies and talked me for not being able to control them, like it's my fault that her grandkids act like animals, and not the fact that their mother apparently treats them like animals, and she herself give them treats when they have temper tantrums instead of putting them in timeout like a normal person. Their mom promised to be back by 9. Important because I was in high school. She wasn't back until 2 a.m., and that was after I started calling all the bars to find her. I was planning to eat dinner afterwards, so I was starving. I called my mom, and she ordered delivery for me. The grandmother got pissed that she didn't order enough for the kids too, and guilt me into sharing it. The mom finally came home, paid me 10 for 10 hours of babysitting, even though we agreed on 20 for 5 hours, and proceeded to talk me next time. She went out saying I was lazy and a bad babysitter. She said I should have beat their asses and locked them in the bedroom when they started acting up. Edit my mom, and I contacted CPS afterward a few times. Unfortunately, nothing came of it. Where I live, they give people 24-hour notice before inspecting a house, so I'm sure she was able to hide whatever, or they just gave her a warning. I never babysat there again. Story 40. When my brother did babysitting for a neighbor's kids, their rule was no locking the bathroom door, allow 1 minute for the kid to do 1, 3 minutes for 2, and go inside to check if they take longer. Story 41. My aunt used to give us Benadryl to make us fall asleep when I was younger, 4 or 5. I would always pretend to take mine and the spit in my hand and stuff it in the pillowcase. It wasn't because I was clever, though. It was because I couldn't swallow pills. Story 42. Years ago, I was a nanny, and the mom told me that they didn't use the word no, instead to redirect the child when they were doing things that weren't nice. Basically, think of PC principals, mom, and you've got my former boss. Couldn't say the kid was doing something bad, etc. As most of you parents and babysitters can imagine, he was a perfect little demon. The day I quit was when he took a knife off the counter and tried to stab me with it. For his safety and mine, I grab it away, in which set off the fakest and most spoiled tears you've ever heard. I explained to my boss that I could no longer watch the child because redirecting him to calmly lay down the steak knife was a job for a police officer in a hostage situation, not a minimum wage college student. Story 43. Oh God, this is my time to shine. I babysat for this family for the first time ever, and the mother was walking me around the house, giving me instructions and showing me around, and then stopped at the fridge. She explained to me that when I sent her son to bed, I was to give him 1 hot dog out of the fridge. No heating it, no bun, just a cold, soggy hot dog for her son to munch on in bed. Apparently he ate one every night. This was like 7 years ago, and I seriously haven't stopped thinking about it. Story 44. I had to change the kid cloth diaper every 2 hours on the dot. The kid was 6. I assumed it was for some sort of disability or something, but no, his parents just didn't want to potty train him, and the kid was content with being babied. I remember just making the kid put his own diaper on and encouraged him to use the bathroom if he had to go. I never went back. Story 45. This was way back in the mid-90s. Remember before we had DVR and all that jazz, and the only way to see what was currently on each channel was to whip your TV guide, or bring up the TV guide channel on your TV and watch the scrolling bars until you found something decent. In the early mid-90s, advertisers figured out that the TV guide channel was a great advertising medium and would show ads on the top right of the screen and compress the scrolling shows playing now. The parents wouldn't allow me to turn on that channel because of the questionable content of the ads for things like laundry detergent or PG movie previews. The kids were 8 and 11 and were allowed to watch only a very select subset of shows that were usually geared towards kids 5 years younger than them. Nickelodeon was banned in that house, as were the words shucks, hate, and darn. Story 46. The neighbor I babysat for when I was around 12 had 4 rambunctious boys. The youngest, who was probably 2 or 3, was locked in a dog crate under the kitchen counter when I arrived. She told me to leave him there until they returned, which would have been 4 or 5 hours later. I let him out immediately and called my mom, saying that I wanted to call the police because I thought that was super abusive. The crate was too small for him to stretch out in. My mom said no, and so I never did. I also never went back there. To this day, I feel guilty and wonder what else those boys endured. Story 47. Not necessarily a rule, but the first time I went to their house, they told me about their daughter's very serious peanut allergy. walked me through the EpiPen, prevention, phone numbers of their neighbors were doctors. All fine so far. I took this very seriously. But then the mother put her hands on my shoulders and said if she dies, we wouldn't blame you. It wouldn't be your fault. While I appreciate the thought, this freaked me the out, and I was 100 times less comfortable. Story 48, don't tickle the kids. Don't let them tickle each other. There were boys 8 and 10. Apparently they were getting erections while tickling each other, and it ended in some aggressive wrestling. Story 49, the mother of the kids whom I babysat for asked me to wash her industrial-sized windows in my lunch break when the kids had a nap, but didn't pay me extra for it. They were filthy windows because she lived on a high floor of an apartment building, and it was during cyclone season, so there was lots of dust and rain stains mixed together. Whenever ID cleaned the windows, she'd be in the house on her laptop at the dining table, watching me and pointing out areas ID missed. I was 18 and very intimidated by her, so I did a few times. Now I'm 26, and I just can't believe the audacity of her to ask me that, like, at least offer extra money or make lunch for me, etc. Also, she would always come home and say, do you mind if I pay you next time for this shift and the next one altogether? And then when the next shift arrived, she'd say that she thought she already paid me for the previous one. I kept track of the payments and dates on my phone to prove her wrong. I disliked confronting her, but I was a poor uni student, so I definitely stood my ground with that. Oh yeah, the kids were in diapers until they were 3, and I was required to change their diapers, even though I lightly suggested they should be going through potty training. 3-year-old is really disgusting compared to baby. So glad those days are over. Story 50, I'm a professional nanny, and one of the families I worked for had a strict no games rule. Not as in video games, but as in any game that could have a winner and a loser. No board games, no tag, nothing. Winning and losing leads to hurt feelings was their explanation. I'd have to stop the girls any time they said something like, I bet I can get to the end of the driveway faster, and remind the mom, and dad say no competition. Remember, everything had to be perfectly equal, or the parents would lose it completely. I fired them as clients shortly after. Story 51, don't open the guest room closet. I assured them that I had no plans of snooping, and that I wouldn't even go in there as it had nothing to do with babysitting unless the kids were allowed to play in there. They told me that kids don't go in there, that it was off limits, especially the closet. So please stay out, telling me nothing bad, just mind your own business. They tipped well, and the kids were cool, so whatever. Edit, of course I looked. Story 52, no calling the radio station. This was after ID let their 10-year-old daughter call a local radio station to ask the DJ who he thought was hotter, Garth Brooks or Alan Jackson. The DJ, as I recall, told the kid to off and hung up. This was also during the early 90s, when Garth Brooks was kind of cute and looked less like a potato in a cowboy hat, and Alan Jackson was panty-dropping smoking hot. Story 53, they asked me to wash their dishes. Actually, they just said, oh, there are dishes in the sink, on their way out the door, and I inwardly snapped and decided to leave the stupid dishes. Never got invited back to babysit. Never regretted my decision. Story 54, I was told not to read a story to a little kid who was 4. Their reasoning was if I read it, he would not learn to read. Like WTF, I still read stories to my brother, who is 8. He wants me to, and he is one of the best readers. Story 55, don't let the children play with the non-believers. They were a super Christian family that I babysat for a few times. One time the children were looking out the window at the neighbors playing, and I asked if they wanted to go outside and play. And this little 5-year-old looks me in the eyes and says, we can't, they are not a god. So creepy, I wasn't asked back after I accidentally said, oh my gosh one time. Apparently gosh is too close to God LMAO.